Bonjour French 203 students, welcome to your first presentation on Chapter 7, Chapitre 7, en Bretagne. So this is the region of France that we might know in English as Brittany, in kind of the northwest area of France, close to England. And we'll also be talking in this chapter about la vie quotidienne. So la vie you might already recognize as life. Quotidienne means daily, so the daily life. Okay, in the first section of chapter 7, we'll be looking at a cultural topic, and that's how this textbook is organized. Every chapter begins with a cultural topic that we'll explore in a little bit more depth. Okay, in these first few videos, I think it will make sense to conduct them somewhat more in English, just because you may not have had French for some time. You need a little bit of time to get your ear accustomed to this. But what we'll do is look at the 4 different cultural categories or ways of discussing La Bretagne in these first couple of slides. And I'll be showing to you kind of a handy reading technique using technology. I think technology is a great way to help us learn and practice languages and make them even more fun. So what I have done is I've taken each of the sections that we see in this second slide here and in this third slide right here, we see different images of Bretagne, this region of France. So we can kind of look at each of the images, and then I'm going to show you a tool that you can use to take the French that you see there and be able to help you understand some of the unfamiliar vocabulary. Okay, les photos de la Bretagne. Okay, so la Bretagne, c'est la beauté. Okay, I'll go ahead and read this paragraph just so we can kind of hear the French and let it get into our ears and into our brains. And then I'm going to show you kind of a fun and cool technique for helping you with reading practice using technology. Okay, c'est la beauté de ces falaises rocheuses, de ces ports, de ces villages de pêcheurs et des îles de longue de ces 200 kilomètres de côte, aussi bien que de ces beaux paysages et des villages pittoresques de son arrière-pays. Okay, so you might be looking at that and you might see a lot of words that are familiar to you already, but in case some of them are not, here is a fun kind of technique we can use. And hopefully you might have gotten some ideas for using techniques like this from the TED Talk that I'm having you do for the introduction exercise. Okay, so we're going to head over to a website which is called lingro.com. In case you haven't heard of lingro.com before, it's kind of a cool website that takes texts in other languages and turns them into clickable dictionaries. You can do this with websites. You can also do it with files. So what I did was I created just a file of all the different. Let me try and get to my folders here. I created just a Word document of all the text from those slides describing the different areas of La Bretagne. So I've highlighted basically the different areas that are kind of the tour that they're taking us through of this region of France. I put that in bold so it stands out. And then the descriptions of each of those places I put just underneath that. In order to use Lingro as a clickable dictionary, it works best to turn a document like this into a PDF. So I did that. And then I went to Lingro, to File Viewer. I'm going to upload this file in PDF format from my computer. And you'll see the cool thing we can do with this. Okay, so La Bretagne, c'est la beauté. Okay, I think you can easily imagine what beauté means. It's beauty. C'est is always going to be it is, or there is, there are. So when we look back at the slides, okay, we see this beautiful picture. And what English word might come into your mind when you see that? It looks like a cliff or something, right? So the picture helps to give us some context. And back over here, if I read through this a little bit, c'est la beauté de ces falaises rocheuses. What are falaises? Qui sont les falaises? And if I click on that, I automatically realize that it means cliff. So the picture goes along with the vocabulary that they're using. So de ces falaises rocheuses. Okay, so cliffs are probably kind of rocky. They're made from that kind of material. And rocheux, or that would be like the masculine singular form of that adjective. Falaise is a feminine noun, and it's in its plural form, so we're going to change it to rocheuses to agree with that. These are rocky cliffs. So here is a little bit of the beauty of Bretagne. Ces falaises rocheuses de ces ports, its ports, de ces villages, de pêcheurs. Okay, what about pêcheurs? Okay, so the fishing villages, et des îles le long de ces 200 kilomètres de côte. So the islands all along its 200 kilometers of coast. Okay, aussi bien que, okay, aussi is also, bien is like good or well, so it's like saying as well as, de ces beaux paysages. Okay, so countryside or landscape, et des villages pittoresques de son arrière-pays. Okay, pittoresque, I think we can guess the meaning of that from English, but if I want to check the translation, I know that it means picturesque. Okay, so we've learned a little bit already about the beauty of Bretagne. So the beautiful rocky cliffs, its ports, its fishing villages, all along its 200 kilometers of coast, its picturesque villages in kind of rural areas of that region. So that's another way of, one way of thinking of La Bretagne, its beauty. Okay, another way, if we go back to our presentation. Et la Bretagne, c'est une identité culturelle aux racines celtiques. Okay, you can probably figure out from context what some of this means. Celtique looks like Celtic in English, right? So there are probably some Celtic roots that go along with this region of France. And in fact, I remember years ago, when I participated in a volunteer project, and it was in a different region of France, but one of the leaders of our project was someone who was from Spain, but he had spent some time in this region of France also, and the region that he was from in Spain, they also spoke a Celtic language there, in Galicia, Spain. So he had a lot of knowledge of the different Celtic regions in Spain and in France. So it was really quite interesting. So there are definitely these pockets of Celtic culture in different European countries. Okay. So, c'est une identité culturelle, a cultural identity of Celtic roots. Okay, racine is root. It can be root as in the roots of a tree or cultural roots. Okay, qui se révèle. Okay, notice here, this is the type of verb we're going to begin learning about as we move into the first grammar topic of Chapter 7, these reflexive verbs. So, révèle, if I were to check just this, it's basically reveal, and se is like to reveal itself. So this culture qui se révèle dans ses fêtes traditionnelles et qui s'entend dans le breton. Yes. So qui s'entend, there's another one of those reflexive verbs, and it's basically, let's scroll down here a little bit. This one, it doesn't really give us a good definition there, but it basically expresses itself. Dans le breton, which would be the Breton language. So this is a regional language spoken in France in this region, and it is a Celtic language. And it's la langue officielle de la région et bien sûr le français. Donc les deux langues se parlent dans cette région. So they speak both French and Breton. Mais le breton est sa langue régionale. So it's spoken in that region, but of course French is going to be the main language of the entire country. Okay, so to look at another picture on the following slide. La Bretagne, c'est les grandes villes historiques. So you can see by the picture there, we have this very beautiful picture of a historic village or historic city or town. Okay, and if we go back to our handy Lingro tool, okay, comme la ville de Vannes et comme sa capitale. So I think this is all pretty recognizable. So historic villages like Vannes, like its capital Rennes, avec ses maisons à colombage et ses nombreux bars et cafés de sa célèbre rue de la Soif. The only word that might be a little bit unfamiliar here is colombage. Let's take a look at that one. And it's related to timber. So if we look back at the picture, we can see houses that seem to be made of wood in a special style. So that helps us kind of understand what that means a little bit better too. Okay, so we know that Vannes is a city, Rennes is kind of the capital of that region. We see houses built in a special style of wood, and lots of bars and cafes on this very famous Rue de la Soif. And that kind of makes me laugh a little bit because soif, j'ai soif, means I'm thirsty. So if you go to Rue de la Soif, you're definitely going to find some places to quench your thirst. Okay, and finally, the last part we'll look at here, La Bretagne, c'est des sites préhistoriques. So we're going to see some prehistoric sites, and this looks a whole lot like Stonehenge in the UK, right? So you can definitely see some Celtic connections between these two areas, even though they're separated by a channel of water. The Celtic cultures definitely must have influenced each other. Okay, so final description here. C'est des sites préhistoriques comme les alignements de Karnak. Okay, so alignment, basically like the kind of the stones that you see there. Une des plus importantes collections mégalithiques du monde. So from the megalithic period. So definitely some interesting prehistoric sites to be able to see in that region of France. Okay, so I think Lingro is a pretty interesting tool to be able to help you read something online, whether it be a web page, or you can take text from something like these slides, insert it into a document, and then be able to look up vocabulary without having to stop and check a paper dictionary or a separate tab on your computer. So that's a tip that you can use to make your reading, your language learning a little bit easier and more fun. Okay, so another thing I did want to mention about the presentations, like I said, we're going to be starting out in some English and some French just to kind of get our ears accustomed to hearing the language again. With these presentations, I will also try to include sometimes some interactive questions, whether that be a multiple choice, a true false, maybe a short answer question, maybe a little pronunciation practice. These are questions that you can answer within the presentations. They're not required. You can answer them. I will see your answers if you decided to answer them. They will be good preparation for chapter tests, for cultural discovery projects, for the oral activities that will come later in the semester. So I definitely encourage you to practice and learn the material by answering those questions. So I hope that this was helpful for you, this will be a good way for us to interact throughout the semester. So, bonne chance avec tous, bonne nuit, et on se voit plus tard.